Me when I pull the plug out from underneath the unsuspecting duck. Get flushed, idiot. Okay. So, Mai has now been out for nearly 2 weeks. And I've had a lot of requests to add this one to my collection. So whenever a new DLC character comes out, I like to do some tips and advice for like how to counter that character. Mai's kind of unique, and I noticed while preparing this segment that her counterplay is very character specific. So we're also probably going to be jumping around characters more than usual for these because a lot of the stuff is not universal. So I'll mention that as we get there. If you like these kind of videos, make sure to hit that subscribe button and let's get on with it. So as usual, I'm going to start off talking about normals because usually we do normals first and then specials and then supers. So starting with the normals, I actually don't have a whole lot to say about her normals. There's not too much in the way of like interesting matchup advice I have for her normals. They're all fairly standard. The only things to say is that almost all of her normals are safe on block. You know, even stuff like stand heavy kick is safe, heavy punch is safe, crouch heavy punch is safe. Other than obvious stuff like crouch heavy kick, you know, it's a sweep, so it's very punishable. But the usual big heavies are all -3. But the other side of that is that one thing you need to know about Mai is that she has no plus frames. Not a single one of her normals is plus on block by default. As long as she's not doing chained lights, she cannot frame trap you. Now, there is a couple of exceptions to this. Be careful of meaties, because she has a couple of normals which she can make meaty and turn them from slightly minus into surprisingly plus. So, for example, her back heavy kick is the main one to look out for. Yeah, so like, for example, that one was +3. She can be quite plus after certain meaties, so just keep an eye out for that. The other thing that I think is important to mention about Mai's normals is that Mai does not have a long-range 5-frame light. So, like, her jabs are both 4-frame. Her stand light kick is a 4-frame. This thing has no range. A crouch light kick has a bit more range as a 5-frame, but it's not very good, and you can't really convert off it from distance. And the reason that I bring this up is because this makes Mai very vulnerable to having her turn stolen back after a light string. So, particularly if the character that you're playing as has a good 5-frame light yourself. So let me show you an example of that. So I'm going to use Ryu. I'm going to do a string of like 3 jabs with Mai. This is like a common like thing that you'll do to hit confirm. You'll do like a jab string like this. And I'm going to set Ryu after the 3rd jab to always wake up with stand light kick. And notice that Mai is incredibly ill-equipped to deal with this. So if I try and do 3 jabs and then block, I'm in range. If I try and walk back here, I can't, I'm in range. If I try and backdash here, I don't get out, I'm in range. If I try and cancel into Ryu Embu, I get smoked. If I try and cancel into Fireball, I get smoked. Like, she's one of those characters that does not have a good answer to this situation, really. You can't even do like a medium. Like, if I try and do crouch medium punch here, I get smoked. So, her options for stopping you from just pressing a long-range 5-frame here are actually really bad. All she can really do, the only counterplay my players can really do here is, like, EX fan. Which doesn't really lead to much, because if you notice, EX fan on counter hit is only +5. So, like, I can't actually even pick up a combo out of this, even if I do catch them mashing, and I had to spend 2 bars of drive to stop that. So yeah, she's not well equipped to deal with that situation. The only other option she has, other than like spending bar here, is she can go for a 4th light. Like that, which will work if your opponent autopilot stand light kick every single time here. But it's very risky, because if they do anything other than stand light kick, the 4th jab will whiff. So she has to take quite a big risk to stop you pressing 5 frames here. And as an example, if the Ryu player presses, like, I don't know, stand heavy punch, for example, that will happen. Okay, let's move on to Mai's special moves. So I'll cover the obvious stuff first. Light Ryu Embu, this thing. This is -4 on block. And it has a bigger hurt box than you might expect this thing. So, unless it's spaced really well, this thing is often very punishable. So, like, this is a punish. At most ranges. Like, it's only safe at the absolute tip. Like this. And even then, if your character has a long-range 4-frame, this is actually punishable at every single range. So, for example, if I switch to Luke, I think it's always a punish. So, yeah, make sure you're always punishing this thing, if possible. Speaking of common special moves to punish, the dive is another one. So, this thing is a common way to beat your anti-airs. Like, my players will sometimes try and, like, counter hit you out of startup by doing, like, a dive to bait your anti-air. But keep in mind, this thing is -4 or worse if it hits above sort of like waist height. So like it's safe below the waist, and above the waist, it's like -4 to -7. So if you block this from like the waist up, you can always jab punish this thing. Like that. Also worth mentioning, the EX version can never ever be plus on block. Even if the EX version hits you in the toes, like this, notice how even like the lowest possible height, this is still -1. And the same for the regular version as well. No version of this can ever be plus, except when Mai has fire stocks active. You need to pay attention here. So if she has the fire stocks active, this move gets a lot better. Like that. But one thing that I think you guys should know is that even with fire stocks and EX, this thing maxes out at +1 most of the time. Like even with a level 1 and an EX move here, this is usually +1 at best. Like you see how low this is hitting, and it's still only +1. So the reason that I mentioned that is that yes, Mai is plus, but it is worth mentioning that +1 is not enough to get a tick throw in this game. So if I set Luke to mash crouch jab here, and I go for a throw, I will get counter hit. I think the only way it's physically possible to make this +2 is like pixel perfect spacing. Yeah, I think if you hit like the absolute bottom of the toenails like this, it can just barely be +2. But 99.9% of the time, it's not going to be +2. It's going to be like 0 or +1. So it's not as plus as you think it should be. Okay, let's move on to probably the single most important normal to talk about with Mai, which is her fans. Okay, so the fans are probably the move that I've had the single most requests for advice for. I think people are really struggling to deal with the various different versions of this. There's a lot of variation in how they all function. She's got a lot of different versions of this move, and it changes with like stocks and stuff. So there's a lot to know about her fans, so I'll try and cover the ones that I think are important. So her basic fan, just the simplest one, this, if you don't already know, this one's pretty simple. You can beat this with normals, unlike every other projectile in the game. So if you see the uncharged basic one coming at you, you can just punch it to get rid of it. But yeah, it's like counterintuitive to like experienced Street Fighter players to try and punch a fireball. But this is actually the most efficient way to just get rid of the threat of this thing, is just to jab it. You can hit it with like mediums and heavies as well, but they have a lot more recovery. So the best thing to do usually is just jab it, but be careful because that can happen. If you press your jab too late, you can get hit by it. If you're a character with a privileged drive rush, like Aki for example, you can actually cancel the jab into a drive rush cancel and then get a punish, but it's very hard to do. The timing's quite tight. There we go. This is possible. It's just really hard to do. It's not as viable as I thought it was on day one, but it is an option available to you if your reactions are good. You can do that. Oh yeah, one other thing to mention about the regular fan is that it has no projectile durability. So if you're playing any character with a fireball, you can just cut straight through this thing with your own fireball, and it will just delete it. So in Fireball Wars, her fan is not good. The regular version, you can just completely ignore it. But that kind of changes a bit once we get to the charged fan. This is where things get a bit more complicated. So this one, once it's charged, it becomes like a normal projectile with a single hit of durability. Like this. Once this makes contact with you, it bounces up and down. And one thing you need to pay close attention to is to how fast the projectile is moving. This is really important. if the projectile is slow, like this, that means it's the light punch version and it doesn't bounce very high. So it's going to come back down very quickly like that. Whereas if you see it traveling much faster through the air, it's the heavy punch version. And it's going to bounce very high before it comes back down again. And the amount of time you have between the first hit and the bounce depends a lot on these factors. So if you see a fast projectile, you've got more time to work with to avoid the second hit. But if you see a very slow projectile, you're pretty much locked down. Like, you can't backdash here. So yeah, pay attention to how fast it moves. And generally speaking, my players will use this as like a way to get things started with like a low or overhead, or like they might do a throw if they think you're gonna parry. Oh, one thing to mention here that's character specific, I guess. So if you play a tool character, and I think the tool characters in this game, as far as I know, is JP, Marissa, and Zangief. If you play any of those characters, one important thing to know is that because they're so tall, the second hit of the fan hits much earlier, and this can actually make things slightly easier defensively for you, because if you play a tool character, the gap between the first and second hits of the light fan are so close together, it's actually really hard for Mai to do a throw here. Like, if I do like this and try and throw, it's almost impossible to get a tick throw here because the gap is so small between the hits. They're in block stun pretty much the entire time. So if you play a tool character, parrying is actually really good against light fan, because even if I predict that you're going to parry here, it's actually really hard to get a throw out in this gap against tool characters. It is possible, I think, just barely. I think there's like a one... I think it might be frame perfect. I'm not even sure. I think there's like a 1 frame window where you can throw here. Yeah, there it is. So it is possible to throw, but it's so obscenely difficult that if you play a tool character, you're actually privileged here. Zangief actually benefits from being a big boy for once. So ignoring the usage of the charge fan in neutral, one of the most common ways that my players will use this thing is as an Oki option. So my players like to do stuff like this. They'll do something like that. So they'll get a knockdown on you, and then they'll do a charged fan in your face. And it's very difficult to punish, because even if you press a button here, you'll just get hit by the falling fan. Like, this is a really common Oki setup for my players. So I would strongly recommend hitting the lab and learning the perfect parry timing here. There we go. So the easiest option is to do that. If you just want a completely safe option, perfect parry back throw is reliable because you won't get hit by the falling fan. So if you just don't want to take any risks and just reverse the Oki situation, I recommend just doing perfect parry back throw here like that. If you want to be a bit more stylish, some characters can actually press a heavy after the perfect parry, then they'll get hit by the falling fan, and they can still usually pick up a combo afterwards. I'll just see if Ryu has one for that. Yes, he does. Okay, Ryu can do this. So if you have like a crumple state type move, or just a move with a shitload of hit stun, you can do it here. It's not exclusively crumples, by the way. I'll just show you another one. So like, let's do JP. So JP doesn't have a crumple, but his stand heavy punch does so much hit stun that after the trade, he's plus 25 here, which is kind of crazy. So you can do stuff like this. So yeah, if you feel like getting stylish, you can figure out some fun trade combos for this situation. Oh, I guess one more option here. If you are a character who has an invincible reversal, you can pretty much skip the perfect parry mind game entirely. So, like, the thing about Mai's fans is that she has to charge them right up in your face for, like, a whole second to do them. So if you have an EXDP, you can literally just buffer it on wake up and then watch what she does. And if you see her charging a fan, just do it. So, like, I think this Oki is kind of bad, but a lot of people are getting away with it at the moment because of unfamiliarity. Speaking of this, by the way, one thing I do want to mention, and this is something I see even high-level players not doing, you really want to think about which recovery you're doing against Mai. Do not, if you're against a my player, I strongly suggest not autopiloting back roll, which a lot of people do on every knockdown. And the reason for this is a lot of her Oki setups are good on back roll and bad on rising in place. So in this Oki situation, if I back roll, I'm locked down by the fireball, like I can't jump here, I'll just get hit on the way up. This is a good like lockdown option for Mai. I can't get out of that charged fan. But if I don't back roll, I stay right next to her, and then I can do the same perfect parry stuff because I'm right up in her face. So like that, for example. So being closer to Mai on her Oki situations is actually sometimes better than being far away. I recommend just, I'm not saying always quick rise or always back roll, I'm just saying like mix up your wake up options, you know? And if you do decide to recover in place, look for the perfect parry. As well as those things, my players seem to really like stealing frames by doing a normal into full charge fan. I've seen a lot of my players doing this. But there is an absolutely gigantic gap if she does normal into charged fan, and you can do like a jump. You can do like a full jump combo here. You can also DI here. It's a little bit riskier though. The gap here is so huge that even if you're in burnout, this is still fake. I don't think you can jump. Yeah, you can't jump it once you're in burnout, but you can just still press like I think 6 frames work, or yeah, anything 6 frames or below will interrupt this. Even in burnout, so it's not a true like burnout pressure sequence. Let's move on to the EX fan throw real quick. The thing about the EX is that it has one fixed bounce height. There's not really like a mix up here in like how quickly it's gonna fall. There's only one version of the EX fan, so there's a few ways of dealing with this thing as like a way that your opponent's gonna skip neutral, but quite a lot of them are character specific. So if you have any kind of a special move that's projectile invulnerable, you can often use that as a way to completely avoid her mix-up game here. So for example, if Mai does this into a dash, Geef can just do jab into lariat. Like that. You can also backdash. So like you do have enough time to backdash here to avoid the second bounce. But this is kind of risky because if you do backdash and they do like a drive rush, for example, you will get smoked. So you can't, this is an option available to you, but it's kind of risky. The other thing a lot of my players like to do is they like to use EX fan and then do a forward jump. They'll use it as like a sort of shield to jump behind. This is very common as well. And this is super fake. Basically any character with like a decent anti-air special, like a DP, can get out of this. Like this is not real. You can do this surprisingly late. And even if it trades, like worst case scenario, you trade like that, it's probably still a good trade to take. Yeah, I recommend doing a slight walk forward here to get under the bounce. If you're Ryu. Some characters don't have to do this. Like if you're playing, I think probably the most brain dead one is Guile. Like Guile never has to respect this because you just literally just hold down back the entire time and then just yeet a flash kick. Like this is the fakest thing in the world against Guile. Because you never have to let go of down back. Ken is a little bit privileged here as well, yeah, because his heavy DP is projectile invincible. Yeah, Geef can lariat. Geef doesn't have to respect this either. So yeah, a lot of characters can deal with this, some easier than others. I haven't tested everyone. Sometimes you need to just walk forward a tiny bit before doing a DP. I think those are the main fans that you need to be aware of. Like there's a couple more variants, like you know, she can do stuff like this. But I don't think there's too much to say about the other versions of fan that I didn't already cover because the mind game is basically the same. Like there's more fans, but it's basically the same idea, which is like high-low throw mix-up if you block it. The only thing that I do think is worth mentioning about the quadruple fans is that there's this gimmick that I've seen a lot where you do like 4 fans full screen and then you do level 1. And people have been using this as like a way to get Mai's fire stocks online, quote unquote safely. But I do think it's worth mentioning this is fake. It is actually universally possible to punish this, and I will show you how. I'm even going to use a character with a terrible drive rush just to illustrate that even slow characters can do this. Who's got the slowest drive rush? Manon, I guess? Timing's a little bit strict. There we go. You can just drive reversal straight through the remaining fireballs, and then you've got a billion frames to work with to punish. So even if your character has like the worst drive rush in the universe, like Manon, you still get a punish here. It's like a much easier version of Aki's level 2 punish, yeah. So do not let my players get away with this gimmick, because it is not good. I guess the rest of her specials, the ones that I haven't mentioned, are generally combo filler, so there's not too much to mention about the other specials. The only one that probably you should watch out for is that some my players like to use the elbow as a meaty option on a knockdown. So this is like a thing that a lot of people are doing. They're using like the elbow late hit as like a meaty. This setup is +4, for example. But keep in mind, this, similar to the fan Oki, this is extremely perfect parryable, because you can watch my sailing through the air for like 200,000 years. So I recommend just spending some time again, just learning the perfect parry timing here, because it's so telegraphed. And again, you can just DP as well if you don't feel like doing that, or just like wake up super, you know. Or I guess if you have a wake up super that doesn't suck, unlike Zangief, you can. So I think that's most of the stuff that I wanted to talk about. I guess the last thing is just like a bit of general advice, which is her flame stock level 2. So Mai's regular level 2 is pretty bad, or like, it's not bad, it's just like meh. But this thing, like the regular level 2 doesn't really unlock anything in the way of punish options or anything special. It's mostly just combo filler. But once she has fire stocks, you need to be very careful, because she suddenly has access to a 7-frame full screen like cruise missile. So once she has the fire stocks, you know, obviously don't carelessly throw fireballs, because you will die for it. You should treat it a bit like the same like respect you would give to Cammy's level 3. She actually does have a kind of an interesting thing where, although the grounded version of her regular level 2 is not a good punish option, the air version, this one, you can actually use this as a fireball punish. I've seen a lot of people talk about using the instant air level 2. I wouldn't respect this too much, because one thing people don't talk about is that the instant air level 2 does absolute dog shit damage. So like, if she uses this from distance to punish a fireball, this does 1,800 damage. So that's less than her level 1, right? Yeah, because it loses a bunch of hits from distance. This does crap damage. So even though she can punish fireballs, I wouldn't give this thing too much respect, because unless you're very low on health, it's not that good. Sometimes I would be happy for my opponent to lose 2 bars of super in exchange for not a whole lot of damage. So that's kind of a meme as well. I think that's everything I wanted to cover. I think that's most of the important stuff you need to be aware of in this matchup. Maybe if you've got any other questions that I haven't covered here, you can let me know down in the comments. And I will see you guys all in the next video.